Animal health plays a critical role in the Zimbabwean economy, given that when we speak of animal health, we are looking at livestock, the domesticated animals. They play a critical role when we speak to issues of food security, economic stability, as well as ecosystem or biodiversity. In line with food security, healthy animals can be a good source of food, nutrients, the protein content that we require as an economy for our socio-economical development, given that Zimbabwe is a youthful country, and as such, development is anchored on human resources. Looking at issues surrounding economic stability, the majority of our population lives in rural areas where rural development is driven by draft power, where we are saying our animals are a source of food, manure, as well as labor. And when we talk of ecosystem and biodiversity, it is self-explanatory, where we are saying that we need human existence as well as animal existence to support plant life, where we obtain our oxygen. This and more on agricultural new directions, agribusiness, in support of Vision 2030. Stay tuned. Thank you, Zimbabwe, for staying tuned to Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness, in support of Vision 2030. Today, we are looking at cattle dipping. And as such, I have taken the liberty of inviting Dr. Choga, Technical Advisor with Cooper's Animal Health. Dr. Choga, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Wadzi, for having us on the program.
Yes. As we get into our discussion, Dr. Choga, I would like us to look at issues surrounding dipping. Speak to us about the importance of dipping when it comes to livestock production.
Thank you for your question, Wadzi. So when we're looking at dipping is very, very critical for the Zimbabwean farmer. Just to give you a backdrop in terms of why it's important. As a country, over the past, I would say from 2016 to date, we've lost 500,000 cattle attributed to a tick-borne disease called THEILERIOSIS or January disease. So dipping is very critical in terms of tick control, which are the causative or the agent that spreads that disease, in addition to the control of flies and mites, which reduce productivity for most of our farmers.
Okay. Yeah. Now, Dr. Choga, you would find that we do have various ticks which are responsible for carrying or transmitting various diseases. What would you advise our Zimbabwean farmers in line with identifying the ticks, the diseases that they transmit on this program?
Okay. So when we're looking at the type of or the species of ticks that we have in Zimbabwe, we have about 4 ticks of importance to our livestock. And I'll start with one called the blue tick. The blue tick is a tick that spreads red water and gall sickness. So when you're looking at red water and gall sickness, these are diseases where the ticks transmit a parasite that destroys the red blood cells, and ultimately reducing the productivity of our animal. And ultimately, because of the disease, it results in death of the animals if not treated. So that's the blue tick. And when you're looking at red water, for example, I always laugh because the type of signs that you see with red water is actually not red urine that the animals produce. They produce urine that's between black and brown, more of the color of coke. So that's the kind of sign that the farmers will be seeing, and the animals will be very anemic, causing weakness. Then the other disease that I also highlighted, which is gall sickness. In Shona, they call it nyongo, and in some cases they call it chirwereche susu. So that disease, it causes yellowing of the inside of the eyelid when they look at the eyes or any other parts that they can see clearly, or if the animal is white, they can clearly see that it's yellowish in color.
Okay.
And ultimately, those diseases reduce productivity, but also they may cause loss of our livestock. So that is the first tick that I had to talk about. Then secondly, I'll speak about a tick that I think is really critical and has been the major transmitter of the disease that's causing havoc, which is January disease. And that tick is called the brown ear tick.
Okay.
And I think farmers should know about that tick. So the brown ear tick, it spreads January disease, but it can also spread red water and gall sickness. And that disease, January disease, in terms of the signs that a farmer should be looking at, there is weeping, like the animals will be like producing tears.
Okay.
There is salivation, where they're actually drooling saliva, and they can be frothing, difficulty in breathing, and the lymph nodes will be enlarged.
Yeah, thank you so much for
Shona,
mentioning the Shona names as well. I understand that most of our rural farming community are tuning in and taking notes. Thank you so much for that. You can proceed.
Okay, that's fine. So that's the brown ear tick. Then we've got the bond tick. So the bond tick is it's a very interesting tick because it's a very colorful tick when farmers look at it, and this tick is responsible for spreading heart water. And this disease, I'm sure most of the farmers are aware of it. We find it in goats, it also affects cattle as well and sheep. And this disease, basically, it causes neurological signs. So these ticks are responsible for spreading that disease. Then lastly, we also have what we call a bond-legged tick. So this bond-legged tick, it causes a disease called sweating sickness, and it mainly affects your younger cows, like sort of within the first 3 months of birth. And how you can, farmers can actually identify it is it causes like wetting of the hairs of the animal, and there can be hair loss, and ultimately these animals will end up with some form of wounds that then result in sometimes death of the young ones. But this disease is not really caused by a parasite or some pathogen of sort, but it's as a result of an allergic response to the saliva of the bond tick. So those are the ticks that we have in Zimbabwe.
Now, Dr. Chogas, from identifying the ticks and the diseases that they transmit, I want us to look at the dips that are available on the market, or the active ingredients. Okay. What are the key fundamentals that a Zimbabwean farmer has to recognize in order to take a suitable dip that will carry out whatever function that he's looking to?
Okay. No, thank you for that question, Wadza. So when we look at the dips, the types of chemicals that we have to control ticks across the world. These specific chemicals, we call them contact poisons, and it's critical for our farmers to understand that when you are using dips, that dip has to come into contact with either the tick, the fly, or the mite, depending on whatever parasite you're trying to control. And when it comes to applying them, our overall goal is to be able to apply it on an animal to form a thin film around the body of the animal, so that it can protect from the ticks. So in terms of the types of chemicals that are available, basically there are 3 major chemicals that are available across the world, and these 3 chemicals have been what we've had for several years. So we've got what we call organophosphates. Within these organophosphates, these are purple labels. I'm sure for the guys that are doing crop farming, they know the roga. So in our case, we've got a chemical called chlorphenvinphos. It fits into that classification, and an example of a dip that has chlorphenvinphos is super dip. Okay, and in terms of what sort of parasites it controls, in terms of the external parasites, it controls ticks, lice, and also immature flies. Like your maggots, what we call maggots.
Okay, that are still in the cycle, developing into the fly.
Exactly.
Okay.
So when a farmer has got a challenge with say, a fly is coming from a compost, they can actually pour super dip on it, and it can
manure.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So that's how the organophosphates work. Then the second type of chemical group that's available on the market are amitrose-based dips, or amidins. And these amitrose-based dips, an example is amitrose, and another one is samazole. And an example of a product that they can find on the market is Triatix, or one that's being used in communal dip tanks called Amitic.
Okay.
Okay. So those are the chemicals that you find in the examples. And in terms of the parasites that they can control mites, ticks, and lice. Basically.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Choga. They heard it, viewers. We're going to go on a short commercial break. Right back with this and more in the second segment. Stay tuned. Thank you, farmers, for staying tuned to Agricultural New Directions Agribusiness in support of Vision 2030. Today, we are looking at animal health, and as such, we have taken the liberty of inviting Dr. Choga, technical advisor with Cooper's Animal Health. Now, viewers, we encourage you to be a part of these conversations. Feel free to get in touch with the producer, Wadzanai Manyore, on 0772807506. Alternatively, you can like our Facebook page, Agribusiness with Wadzanai. Make a follow-up on this episode and more, and leave your comments and suggestions. They are most welcome to us. Our YouTube channel is Agribusiness with Wadzanai. We are also now available on X, formerly known as Twitter. It's at Agribusiness 110. On LinkedIn, we have a growing, thriving community there where most of these discussions do take place. Our profile is at Wadzanai Manyore. Now, Dr. Choga, we are here in the second segment. Welcome back.
Thank you.
As we get into this discussion, Dr. Choga, I still want us to continue where we left off in the first segment, where we're looking at deep selection. Can we continue on that?
Yes, sure, Wadzanai. So the third chemical group that we have are called synthetic pyrethroids. So for this group, examples of chemicals that are in this group are the cypermethrin, flumethrin, deltamethrin. So most of the chemicals that you see being used in livestock with a methrin will be in this specific group. And an example of a dip that's within that group is Decatix, and also spot on. So in terms of the parasites that it can control, this group is well known for controlling flies. And as you know, we're getting into the rainy season. Flies are going to be a big problem with farmers. So that's the kind of dip that I would recommend them to use. But in addition to flies, it also controls ticks and lice as well. Okay. So that's your synthetic pyrethroid. Then lastly, there is another group which is not traditionally used for tick control. These are ivermectins. So these ivermectins are now being used where we're seeing cases of resistance. Because in terms of resistance, we've seen a lot of resistance with the blue tick and not any other tick. Okay. And where farmers are having challenges, they can use ivermectins as a supplement. And in terms of the examples, we've got ecomectin and bimectin. And these products, they are used in addition to the dips because they only control blue ticks and not the other ticks that cause problems.
Okay, now Dr. Choga, looking at the mode of dipping that you would recommend, and do we even have instances where you would say this dip would go hand in glove with this sort of infrastructure? Is there any infrastructure that you would highlight as the most effective and efficient when it comes to cattle dipping? Okay,
well, thank you for that question. It's a pertinent one. So in terms of the infrastructure for dipping, we've got various types of dipping or modes of dipping. There is plunge dipping, where your animals can actually plunge into a dip tank. And with plunge dipping, in that case, the farmers would need to have set up a structure where there are sort of handling facilities, spray rests, and the plunge dip should be constructed. And that's one of the most effective methods of dipping. Why? Because our animal is going to be fully immersed in it, which means that there will be a full cover without any doubt. But it comes with a disadvantage of the cost of building it, to try and compare it with the scale of the farmer and the cost. But for the bigger farmers, it works. Or where we've got what we call communal dip tanks, which we as Coopers have been actively involved, working with communities under a program that we call the Communal Dipping Program. And we are working with small-scale farmers that come together, and we help them with their dipping using the infrastructure that they have in their different wards. Okay. Then the second method of dipping is spray rest. So spray rest, the farmer would need to buy the spray rest, and there are quite a number of companies that supply that, and it's a structure that they can come, install, and move if they are renting a farm. With that method of dipping, in most cases, the farmers are able to at least achieve control of 90%. So with spray rest, what we then recommend, because it's 90%, it's not full cover, because areas like under the tail, the dip won't be able to reach.
Maybe behind the ears.
Exactly, within the ears. So usually we then recommend supplementary methods like usage of things like tick grease, and also maybe applying a poron to a certain extent. The other method that's also critical is hand spraying. So hand spraying is one of the common methods being used by farmers on their individual capacity. Why? Because in Zimbabwe we've seen that 90% of our cattle are owned by small-scale farmers, and these are guys that have got cattle between 3 and 5, and because of that, the only infrastructure that they will have is probably a knapsack sprayer.
Okay.
And they can utilize it, but the challenge with this method is that the farmers would need to make sure that as they are spraying their animals, they are spraying them thoroughly.
Okay.
And for them to do that, they would need what we call a race, or in Shona, Rukodoya, or Mfaso, where they put their cattle and they spray their animals until they are sufficiently covered.
Okay.
Yeah. Then the last method is what we call pour-on dipping. So pour-on dipping is a type of dipping where you're using dips that don't need to be mixed with water, because all of these other forms of dipping, the dipping chemical has to be mixed with water. So with pour-on dipping, they are applying it on the back line at a dosage of 1:10 kgs. And an example of a dip that they can use for that is spot on, and they just apply it on the back. It comes with an advantage where, like, as we are in the rainy season now, the farmer can decide, let me dip my cattle now. And if they dip their cattle now with, for example, using plunge dipping, and it rains within an hour or two, it means that all that dip that they applied would have been washed
away.
Yeah, so with pour-on dipping, the chemicals that are being used are rain fast, which means that if it rains, they are not washed off.
Okay.
So it will still be effective. So they can use pour-on dipping when they are seeing that the rains are coming like every day, and they don't know, if I dip now and maybe in 30 minutes to an hour it's going to rain, they can use pour-on dipping. So that's the advantage of that, but it comes at a higher cost than your ordinary methods.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Choga, for that. From this discussion, I am picking that the dip tank appears to be the most effective as well as cost-effective mode of dipping. However, we do have our Zimbabwean farmers coming in with knapsack sprayers, cattle races, etc. But from what I have picked, the traditional method of the dip tank remains the most effective and efficient. If someone has access to that, that is what we would advise and recommend. There you have it, viewers. We've come to the end of the second segment. We're going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the third and final segment. Stay tuned. Thank you, farmers, for staying tuned to Agriculture and New Directions, Agribusiness in support of Vision 2030. This is a pertinent discussion that is centered on livestock health, where we are looking at issues surrounding disease transmission as well as chemical use in line with dipping. At this point in time, as we are closing our episode, I am once again joined by Dr. Oswin Choga, who is working with Cooper's Animal Health right here in Harare. Dr. Choga, as we are closing our episode, I want us to look at issues surrounding resistance. In Zimbabwe, we are having issues of the January disease. Would we attribute now the challenges that we are having to the fact that now ticks and January disease are now resistant to the chemicals or the dips on the market? What would you say your sentiments in line with the resistance that we are encountering as a country, as an economy?
Okay, so that's a very important question, Wadza. So when we look at January disease, we have started having a big problem with it, I would say, over the past 10 years. So there is a misconception that it's due to the dips not being able to control the brown ear tick.
Okay.
But with the brown ear tick, it's not an issue of resistance. The only tick that we've seen becoming resistant to some of the dips, it's always area dependent or farm dependent.
Okay.
Is the blue tick.
Okay.
And the blue tick is not causing a lot of problems. It doesn't spread January disease. So what I just want to reiterate is that the brown ear tick is not resistant.
Okay.
But rather it's an issue of the dipping frequency. Because just to give you an idea, the brown ear tick, it spends between 3 to 5 days on an animal.
Okay.
Yet the blue tick, it spends 18 to 23 days on the same animal. So if you, with the blue tick, if you dip every 2 weeks, you are able to control it. With the brown ear tick, it requires us to dip it every week for us to be able to control it.
Okay.
So that's the reason. It's not an issue of resistance why we're getting January disease. Yeah.
As you highlighted earlier in a segment prior to this one, where you were saying 90% of livestock owners are our smallholder farmers,
Yes.
where we are saying one household might have maybe 3 to 10 cattle,
Yeah.
meaning that as a group they do constitute the larger amount of the entire livestock industry in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
But at the same time, they want to cut corners.
Yes.
Mavakagarisa now.
Yeah.
So there might be some myths, some misconception in line with dipping, in line with chemicals.
Yes.
What would you want to say demystifying those misconceptions?
All right. So one of the common one that I've seen is that I've seen farmers get into an vet shop or an agro shop, and they say, you know what, I'm looking for a dip, but I want the purple label because the purple label is more effective.
It's the strongest.
So that's not true. So in terms of the purple labels, it's an issue of them being toxic to humans and other mammals, which is your cattle, your sheep, and goats. But when it comes to ticks, they're as effective as the other dips, whether they are orange or green. These other chemicals, if someone swallows them, it's not very likely that they will die if they get medical attention. So that's the only difference. Otherwise, they are all equally effective.
Now, at times, our farmers, especially the smallholder farmers, with wanting to be cost effective, wanting to save, wanting to get more out of a little investment or less capital injection, you would find that some of our Zimbabwean farmers end up purchasing crop chemicals, either herbicides, fungicides, or whatever, mixing with oil and coming with them for animal protection or animal health. What would be your word of advice to our Zimbabwean farming community in line with those advices, given that now we are in a social media era whereby everyone is a consultant, everyone is a technical advisor? They would say, come with your herbicide, we can mix it with oil and use it for animal health. What would you want to say in line with that?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting, Wadzi, because I've come across a lot of that. And one of the reasons why I've seen farmers do that is maybe they are afraid that their animals will die because of January disease, number one. Then number two, because they just find that the crop chemicals are cheaper than the animal health products. So the biggest challenge with using crop chemicals, for example, if you look at most of the chemicals that we're using, the active ingredient will be contributing maybe 12.5%. For example, in the case of an amitraz-based dips. What we don't know is the 87.5%. So us as veterinary companies, we've tested the 87.5% to see whether it's safe for animal use or not. And in most cases, in all cases, it is safe. But if a farmer decides to then utilize that in coming from crop chemicals, the excipients that they use are meant for crops.
Okay.
And I will give you an example of some examples that I've seen in my experience. I've seen in other markets, they utilize a product called ivermectin. So once the farmers utilize ivermectin, they do their mixes to try and get it to the right concentration. But after that, they noticed that their animals were now starting to get blind. And they were getting blind because the ivermectin, if it's in very high concentrations, it can cause what we call nervous signs, which include blindness and other signs. So that's one of the challenges. In addition to that, most of our farmers, because they are not really sure whether the crop chemical will work or not, they will use the crop chemical and take a vet product like maybe Super Deep or whatever and try to use them together.
And mix.
And when they use them together, they increase the toxicity of those products, which means that there will be problems. Then the third critical area is that those products, once we use them on animals, it filters into the food chain, which means it may affect human health because they will stay within the system for longer. So those are some of the concerns that come with it, with also resistance coming into the picture. Given that we only have 3 chemicals that work against all ticks, we don't have a lot of options. We should always try to be more responsible with the usage of these chemicals.
Thank you so much, Dr. Choga, for that. You reiterating the fact that we only have 3 chemicals that have been invented way back. There is no need to reinvent the wheel to come up with new strategies, tactics, or trying to experiment. This is livestock that we are talking about. This is someone's wealth, someone's bank. Thank you so much for taking your time to come onto our platform and educate the Zimbabwean farmer in line with animal health, as well as taking care of your livestock, given that it is our source of wealth in our communities. It was a pleasure having you with us today.
Same here, Wadza. Thank you so much.
There you had it, viewers. Today we're looking at animal health, focusing it on livestock enterprises in Zimbabwe, where we are saying our domesticated animals require to be taken care of. Given that Zimbabwe is a youthful economy, we do require the protein content, we do require the labor, animals being a source of labor, as well as manure. From me, your host was Zanai Manyora. I'm also on Instagram. It's at Wadzi110, and the crew behind the scenes. Have yourselves a fabulous evening. Thank you for watching.